friends. Thanks for joining me here once again in SJ's classes. In this video, I will be summarizing chapter 1 to chapter 5 of George Orwell's Animal Farm. We will quickly go through the important events in these chapters. So, let us begin with chapter 1. In chapter 1, we have the introduction to the farm. The farm is called the Manor Farm and it is owned by Mr. Jones. At the very outset of the novella, we have a discussion on the meeting that is to be convened by Old Major, the prize white middle boar on Animal Farm, or as of now, Manor Farm. We understand that Mr. Jones forgets to lock the pop holes, and this actually helps the animals to gather together and to listen to Old Major. As we read, Old Major wants to communicate the dream that he saw earlier, and he wants to convey this to his fellow beings. We have certain important characters coming to the stage in the very first chapter itself. The three dogs, Bluebell, Jessie and Pincher, are important in the sense it's the young ones that Napoleon later on uses to get hold of the control of the farm. So in that regard, these characters are also important. We also have some of the other characters, important characters coming in first chapter 1 itself. The two cart horses, Boxer and Clover, especially Boxer, who later on becomes an inspiration, a role model for the animals on the farm. We also have Muriel the white goat and Benjamin the donkey appearing in chapter 1. Then Old Major begins his speech. He talks about the nature of life of animals and he says that it is laborious and short and that no animal in England knows the meaning of happiness or leisure after he is a year old. And what is the root cause of all these problems, all this misery? It is man. He says man is the only real enemy we have. Remove man from the scene and the root cause of hunger and overwork is abolished forever. So thus Old Major points out man as the reason for all their trouble, all their hardship, all their misery. And later on he gives them many advices and the most important of them is that all animals are equal. As he says, all animals are comrades. Then he goes on to narrate the dream that he saw earlier, and it's an earth from which man has vanished forever. And this also reminds him of a song which he used to sing during his childhood days. The song is titled Beasts of England. And the song Beasts of England, as I said earlier in the earlier videos, it lyrically visions a future golden time from which man has vanished and everything is controlled by the animals, and there is no slavery, there is no misery, and animals live in freedom. All the animals sing together, the beasts of England. And finally Mr. Jones wakes up and he fires a bullet at the farm thinking that there is a fox on the farm, and the animals disperse. That is where chapter 1 ends. Chapter 2 begins with the death of Old Major. It happens 3 days or 3 nights after the speech, and he was buried at the foot of the orchard. We have two big characters coming into prominence. They are Snowball and Napoleon. They are important characters because, as you know, Animal Farm is a novel that satirizes Russian Revolution, and these two characters, Snowball and Napoleon, have their Russian counterparts. Snowball represents Leon Trotsky and Napoleon represents Stalin. It's against Stalin's dictatorship that George Orwell wrote this novel. So Snowball and Napoleon, both these characters are important. We have yet another character who comes in chapter 2, and that is Squealer. It's through Squealer that later on we understand that Napoleon tries to justify all the rude behaviors, all the bad decisions that he takes for the farm. So, in that regard, Squealer is also important. You also come across Moses, the raven, who is an special pet of Mr. Jones. He talks about a particular place called Sugar Candy Mountain, and he says that that is the place where all animals went after they died. He says that at Sugar Candy Mountain it is Sunday 7 days a week, and there you get all sorts of food at all times. So the animals were actually impressed, but the pigs tried to control this excitement from the part of the animals, and they tried to persuade the animals that there is no such place called Sugar Candy Mountain. Sugar Candy Mountain and Moses are both implicit attack on the Orthodox religion that was present during the rebellion, the Russian Revolution of 1917. We also come across the character of Boxer, and Boxer and Clover were the most loyal disciples. We see that they used to lead the singing of Peace of England during the meetings which they had, actually in secrecy. We also understand that it is in chapter 2 that the rebellion which all major foresaw happened, and the reason for the rebellion is that the animals were not fed properly. This makes them revolt against their human master and his friends. And finally, what happens is that the manor farm is brought under the control of animals. Mr. Jones and the other workers on the farm are chased out of the farm. And finally, the animals make the farm their own. The animals are quite excited as they achieve what all Major spoke about some days back. And Snowball renames the farm. He paints Manor Farm out, and he gives the new name to the farm, which is Animal Farm. And Snowball, as he is good at writing, he also writes 7 commandments. These 7 commandments are important because these commandments are made out of the counsel or advice that was given to them by Old Major. The Old Major's advices are what have now become the 7 commandments. And with a description of that particular idea, chapter 2 ends. We also have a certain kind of inequality creeping in at the end of chapter 2. The cows were milked, and the animals wanted to have that milk, but the pigs say that the milk will be given to them as and when it is time, but the animals never get it. So we understand that there is some sort of creepy inequality that has crept into the farm, even though Old Major has said that all animals are equal. There has come about a sort of inequality on the farm, but right now the animals doesn't recognize it. Chapter 3 talks about how the animals happily work for the harvest, how they enjoy their freedom, and also it talks about Boxer. As I said earlier, he is an important character and he is a source of inspiration for the other animals on the farm. His popular motto that I will work harder inspires the other animals as well. He makes arrangement with the cockerel to call him in the mornings half an hour earlier, and that shows his dedication. So the initial part of the 3rd chapter gives us a clear-cut idea regarding the character of Boxer. We also have a particular ceremony which was followed on all Sundays, After the breakfast, they used to gather together, and there was this hoisting of the flag. And the flag was green in color, and it represented the green fields of England. And you also had the symbols of hoof and horn in it, which signified the future republic of animals, which would arise when the human race was finally overthrown. And all the animals trooped into the big barn for a general assembly, which was known as the meeting. And this is actually the ceremony that happened on all Sundays. And it's in these meetings that discussions related to the work schedule of the next week happened. So, as of now, you have all the animals sitting together and deciding on the things, on the businesses that need to be done on the farm in the coming weeks. We have Snowball, who is a very active character on the farm. He constitutes animal committees like Wild Comrades Re-Education Committee, White Wool Movement. So such committees are made by Snowball so that the animals on the farm will become more active and will involve more in the businesses of the farm. Now, you also find that the pigs were trying to teach the other animals on the farm, but the animals on the farm were having a very difficult time as far as their education is concerned. The boxer's example gives us a hint into how hard education is for these animals. Boxer learns ABCD, and as soon as he learns EFGH, he forgets ABCD. So, and Boxer, as we know, is by far the best among the lot. So, if Boxer cannot handle even ABCD, we can imagine how miserable other animals would be. So, even though it's a failure, we have the animals trying to educate themselves, and the animals were very finding it very difficult to read the seven commandments. So Snowball condenses it to one particular maxim, namely, four legs good, two legs bad. And he says that this contains the essential principle of animalism. And that maxim became very popular with the animals, and especially with the goats. They at times bleat it like in an incessant, like never stopping, in an incessant manner. They used to bleat, four legs good, two legs bad, four legs good, two legs bad. And finally, in chapter 3, there arises the question of the milk and apples. Now, this is where the character of Squealer is understood by the readers. Squealer is a very persuasive talker. He has the ability to persuade his listeners. It's important that you read across these dialogues. Now, through this, you will clearly understand the character of Squealer. He says that the pigs are brain workers and that the whole management of the farm depends on them, and it's very important that they remain healthy, and it's for this that they take milk as well as the apples. And if they don't manage the farm properly, Mr. Jones would come back. And as we read, we understand that this is something that the animals doesn't want. They don't want Mr. Jones to come back, because even if they don't have much luxury, they have something called freedom as of now, and they are enjoying it. So they don't want Mr. Jones to return to the farm. So it's okay for them if the pigs take the apples and the mix, because they are the ones who are controlling, who are actually managing the farm. Chapter 4 begins with how Snowball and Napoleon tries to spread the word regarding the rebellion. They send out flights of pigeons to mingle with animals on neighboring farms and to tell them the story of rebellion, and also to teach them the tune of Beasts of England. That is when we come to understand that Animal Farm has two neighboring farms, Folkswood, which is owned by Mr. Pilkington, and Pinchfield, which is owned by Mr. Frederick. Now, Folkswood is a neglected farm. It's an old-fashioned farm, but Pinchfield was better kept. Mr. Frederick, who was a tough, shrewd man, and even though he was engaged in perpetual lawsuits, he used to take care of his farm. Now, beings did not like the fact that the animals were beautifully managing the works on the farm, and they were trying to spread rumors about the farm that the animals were practicing cannibalism on the farm, and also that they were having their females in common. So we see human beings trying to work out certain rumors so that uh, the entire world will have a bad image regarding Animal Farm. Now, it is in this particular chapter, chapter 4, that we see that the human beings, under the leadership of Mr. Jones, try to recapture the farm. And this was expected, and that is why Snowball had been reading Julius Caesar's campaigns by or through which he learned of certain defensive operations, and therefore he was given the charge of the defensive operations. The human beings, under the leadership of Mr. Jones, they come to the farm, they try to recapture the farm. A violent battle ensues, but at the end of the battle, we understand that the animals have their victory. It is the animals who come out or turn out as victorious. And they also find Mr. Jones' gun at the end of the battle, and they decide to fire it twice. Once on October the 12th, the anniversary of the Battle of the Cowshed, and then on Midsummer Day, the anniversary of the rebellion. That is where chapter 4 ends. And as we move on to chapter 5, chapter 5, as I said in the earlier video, is important because it is in this particular chapter that the entire storyline changes. Now it is from chapter 5 onwards that the animals are gradually going to their old world in which they used to experience misery, slavery, and hardships. Chapter 5 begins with the disappearance of Molly. We understand that Molly goes back to human beings. She likes being a slave. She is a materialistic person, and she likes the materialist things that are given to her by her human masters. She enjoys slavery as she is a materialistic person. So we see that she returns back to her human masters. We also understand that there is a kind of an ego clash, kind of a clash happening between Snowball and Napoleon. They were never at agreement. When one says, let's sow barley, the other would say that the field was better for cabbages. So there was a constant battle, constant tug of war, ego clashes happening between Napoleon and Snowball. And it is in this chapter that Snowball talks much about the windmill that he has planned for the farm. And he says that once the windmill comes, the farm can be electrified, and with this electricity, many machines can be bought into the farm, which would actually make their work easier. Napoleon is against this farm. He doesn't want the farm to follow whatever that Snowball is saying. Therefore, he talks more about the education of the young ones, and that we need to concentrate on food production so that we will not face any shortage in food once winter comes. And as we read further, we understand that the whole farm is divided on this matter. You have many animals who support Snowball, and you also have other animals who support Napoleon. Finally, after a a great speech, Snowball is able to convince the animals on the farm, but Napoleon is not ready to give up his leadership, and this is where he turns himself into an authoritarian. What he does is that he calls in their dogs, which were raised by him in isolation. The dogs were never seen by anyone else, and it's only on this particular day that the animals see these dogs, and they are very terrified to see these dogs. And these dogs, they wag their tails to him in the same way as other dogs had been used to do to Mr. Jones. So this is symbolic of the fact that Napoleon is gradually turning himself into an authoritarian, just like Mr. Jones. Just like the slaves wag their tails before their master, we have the dogs who are the slaves of Napoleon wagging their tails before their master, who is Napoleon. And as we read ahead, we understand that Snowball is chased out of the farm, and Napoleon, along with Squealer and other pigs, take control of the farm. Finally, we have the meetings being cancelled by Napoleon. He says that a committee of pigs will decide the matters related to the farm, and the decisions will be communicated to animals. However, the animals still had hope because the decisions, the policies with respect to the farm were to be decided through a majority voting. So you find that the animals still had some role in the functioning of the farm. Now, you also come across the character of Squealer once again in this chapter towards the end. Squealer is sent to explain the move that is made by Napoleon, and Squealer says that Napoleon has taken this additional duty, has taken this burden so that the animals would not make wrong decisions and thereby give way for Mr. Jones to come back and recapture the farm. Squealer uses words like tactics so as to confuse the animals on the farm. And finally, the animals, as they don't want Mr. Jones to come back to the farm, they understand, or they at least they try to understand the decisions that were made by Napoleon. And this is where chapter 5 comes to an end. I hope you have an understanding regarding the first 5 chapters. In the next video, I will elaborate on the important events of chapter 6. See you all in the next video. Have a nice weekend. Bye.